interesting.
Wonder how big our audience will be tonight.
Oh,
You are live.
well, thank you, Krista. So Krista's just advised me that we have a quorum here today. And so I'd like to call this meeting to order. But before I say that, I'd like to remind everybody that this is going to be a live broadcast for people at home. And I guess it will be captured for posterity in YouTube. So it's going to be out there somewhere. So mind your P's and Q's, as my parents used to say. So let's have a roll call. Would everybody introduce themselves? I think Councillor Cuddle is here.
I am. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, Hama, are you here, sir?
I'm here as well. Thank you.
Very good. Did I say your name correctly, sir?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay, very good. I believe we've got regrets from Graham. And Sumaya Khan, I believe she is not here. Is that true? Okay, so I guess we have regrets there. I believe Jane McNeil.
Yes, hello. Good evening, folks.
Okay, Angela Murphy and Daryl Gooding have given their regrets, and my name is Michael Lamplew, and I chair this delightful committee. And we also have here from a recreation planning specialist, a staff member, Gareth, I believe. Well, he is around somewhere. He's being quiet right now.
Good evening, folks.
Hey there. Welcome, Gareth. Okay, so welcome. I call this committee to order. Do any members, are there any committee announcements that you wish to share?
Not at this time for me.
Okay, we're good to go. So moving on to the approval of the minutes. Does anybody notice any errors or omissions from the minutes of our April 28th meeting?
I believe the Sumaya was not there in the last meeting, but it says it was present. So I'm not sure. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I believe she was not there.
Oh. All right. I have to go back through I didn't notice that in my notes. I guess we'll have to look into that, and subject to that being clarified, do we have are the rest of the minutes in order?
They looked good to me.
Yeah, it read well to me too, when it was beefed up about one of the discussion points that need a little more fluffing up, which is good. So do we have anybody to approve the minutes?
I can move the motion.
Yep.
Okay, and
I'll
a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion, we approve the minutes as subject to clarifying Sumaya's attendance. So let me see now, what do we have? What do we have any additions to our agenda for today? The order of business for today, does this meet everyone's approval?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody to put forward a motion?
I can move the motion.
Okay, thank you, Hamad. And a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so passed.
That was
Oh, well,
Jane.
That was
everybody
me.
approved? Oh, Jane. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Your face didn't pop up.
Oh, okay.
No, well, I've got you now. I guess the way I've got this set up is whoever speaks, I get a face in here. I guess there's another way of looking at this as well.
Yeah, you can do the gallery view.
Oh.
Like if you just tap
Okay.
on your screen
There's
up
everybody.
in the left-hand side, there's a gallery view. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. So Minutes are approved. Everybody in favor? Aye? Nay?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Thank you. Okay, so we will get down to business. I don't know why we do this every time, but I have to ask, do we have any conflicts of interest today?
No.
All right, we self-declare, and I do not either, so let's move on. And I don't believe we have any deferred business to look at, so I think we can move through that. And Krista, do we have any correspondence that's been received that we should address?
Mr. Chair, this is Haruka Aoyama speaking. Krista is experiencing technical difficulties. I'll be clerking at this moment, and I will confirm that there was no correspondence received.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Counselor.
We did receive, I don't know if everyone received it, if it was sent to the committee or to only some of it. I don't know, Gareth, did you get the piece about, gosh, his name is escaping me. I want to say Wayne Rogers and his parents' graves being in the Western Common?
Yeah, I don't know if that was circulated for the advisory committee specifically, if that was just addressed within a staff level. I spoke with Mr. Rogers specifically, though. I've got an update on that later.
Is
Okay,
that,
so
oh, I see, it's down there, sorry, 8.1.4. Yep,
Yep.
got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Excellent.
okay, very good. So we have no petitions to bring forward. Well, that will be covered shortly. So I guess we're moving into a staff update. So according to my notes here, Krista was going to give the update, but is it Haruka? Is that, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Krista might need some more time to come back. So would you please go to the next item, please?
Okay, we'll defer 811 and we'll move on to 812. And Gareth is all, I know you're keen, sir, to give us an update on that. And I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, I believe at our last meeting, I can't even remember if we called a special meeting. It was ultimately to discuss and get some direction from this committee through to Halifax and West, and then eventually regional council, specifically related to the trail type and the decisions which we have to come to, at least as far as do we go with amendments to the overall master plan. We now have that direction from Halifax and West and regional council, at which point we'll be working in tandem with this committee, working with Parks Capital, who ultimately delivers on the construction of the trail type, getting their consultation in there, and then working with our trail consultant as well, through Cobequid, that's done some advanced work to start to determine some more of an integrated approach of doing a manageable and ecologically respectful approach to trail type. So where do we have our barrier-free 6-foot wide trail system, and then where do we go into more of a 2-foot wide backcountry trail system, and how we make it all work in a appropriate manner. That'll come back in the form of a staff report, either to Halifax and West directly, or directly to this committee and then to Halifax and West for greater discussion purposes. I'm going to be working with the clerk's office on that one. So lots of fun things, and it's exciting, and then we'll be able to make that determination of whether it is a true amendment to the master plan or if it's just within the master plan already. And that's all I have on that.
Timeline?
The report has a date of next, actually going to a body of next, hold on one second. Let me see this. I want to say it was next June. I don't have it pulled up in Report Center right here. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, proposed body a year after. But I don't envision it being that long. It's just a matter of when we can get it through.
Gareth,
But-
could you just summarize what the report, what the report will entail again, like what the direction is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the actual motion reads as follows. That Halifax Regional Council requests a staff report considering proposed amendments to the Western Common Wilderness Common Master Plan to consider the implementation of natural surface backcountry trails within interior areas of the Western Wilderness Common. So as folks know, at least based on figure 23 of the Western Common Master Plan, it largely calls for an extensive 6-foot wide barrier-free trail system. And as we've outlined through many conversations with this committee, and we've addressed at least internally with Parks Capital, it's going to be a highly disruptive task to undertake that, which would be pretty disruptive to the natural setting throughout the Western Common. So what we're trying to consider is how we do this most appropriately so that we can be inclusive and accessible in certain sections of the Western Common, and then be respectful to the natural setting as much as possible with the 2-foot wide trail system, which will allow for us to go, and it would be more of a classic hiking trail than an accessible trail. But because it is quite a bit of a departure from what is called for, at least within the master plan, we need to explore what those amendments do look like.
Do you sense that it will be a very, like a real detailed review where they're actually going to look at sections and identify, or will it be more general, Gareth? I'm hoping for the detailed review because I know
I want to look at it from a detailed perspective. I want to be mindful of what we're undertaking here and the implications which are attached to it. Obviously, it's significantly easier from a perspective of it's easier to widen a trail than narrow it, and it's easier to go back and then create a barrier-free sub 5% grade than to recreate the actual natural setting. So even if we're more cautious with what we do as far as mapping out of trail systems and segments of trail where they're going to be accessible to that 6-foot wide sub 5% trail standard, we can always there's opportunities there to go back in the future to expand to that, as opposed to once you dig in and start doing switchbacks and start being disruptive to the natural setting, you can't then replace it in a natural way. I think that's
just the cost and the practicality, we know, right, from the initial, the last several years of work, we know that that's just, it's so cost prohibitive to do that as well, right?
Yeah,
I
and I mean,
from a practical.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily the most popular opinion, but I don't look at this as a cost, cost being a significant factor, as much as it is what are we achieving here as far as what do our priorities for the master plan look like. Absolutely, it was set out initially that we're trying to come up with an accessible barrier-free trail system, but the first and foremost priority of the master plan is to be respectful of the ecology. And we're now, as we're a few years into this, constructing trail, cutting in, widening sections and clearing trees, we're realizing it's highly disruptive to that to the natural systems that are in there. So we want to be respectful first and foremost to the natural setting, and then mindful of how we can be inclusive and accessible as well.
So I just read through our recommendation, which is basically word for word what the council passed, and I agree with Jane that a detailed plan is good, but I'm not sure if that's called for in the motion that we requested of the Western Common Advisory, because we're really asking about the concept of implementing a natural service backcountry trail. We're not asking for specifically where they would be or not be. We're looking to see about changing the plan to incorporate that or modifying it to make that allowable. I'm thinking that doesn't make sense that we have to wait till next June to hear if that approach is acceptable, and then obviously fleshing it out and seeing where these trails where we would stay with 6 foot or where we go with backcountry would be a different task. But do we go all there all at once, or can we sort of do this in 2 steps, do you think?
That's a great question, Mr. Chair. I think that we could do it in steps, to be honest. At our next meeting, we could do a further discussion with the larger group if we get more participation with the advisory committee. I know I have some meetings which will be upcoming in advance of that next meeting with Parks Capital to scope out a little bit more of our work and make sure that we come back with what that scope of work does look like, specifically related to this report, and see if that makes sense. If that's within, if that's what this committee looks like, is interested in at this point, I'm happy to have that conversation next meeting. I believe it's in November.
Is there any discussion from the rest of the committee? Any thoughts on that, what I threw out?
I think that you raise a really good point, because if we're looking at changing the nature of the trails, we spend a lot of time doing the detailed aspect of it, and then, you know, people don't like the change that we're recommending, then it feels like there's potentially some wasted time. On the other hand, it'd be good to have some concept to present, which because we're changing the trails system, it is going to change the nature of the network of trails, I'm imagining. So, you know, some high level concept of where they would go, I think would be appropriate. But you know, in terms of moving this forward, this is a big piece. And essentially, if we're going to, you know, take a year to determine if we're going to do this switch in trail type, it kind of really puts a lot of the work of this committee, I feel, on hold until that gets figured out. So in terms of process in the work that you're doing, Gareth, and I'm just wondering, like, you know, where the committee would continue to be able to be of use in advising and supporting, you know, what you're doing. I mean, how would you see that working?
I would want to be coming back and reporting on the work that we're doing on this, even from a report perspective, because much of what this committee does is obviously advisory, and this is a group of people that are collected from trail knowledge, from environmental knowledge, as local community members. And your input as an advisory committee is going to be crucial to help us get to a point. So sure, we can have conversations at a staff level from a very pragmatic standpoint, but also getting this input from this committee would be essential for us. It's not, I don't think it's a matter of we're doing some work independently of this committee and we come back in next June. I think of it as we're going to do some work over the next month or two, and then we'll come back and have a more fulsome discussion about where we're at, receive some feedback, have that conversation, and then go back again and do some more work. We might even have to call a specialized meeting with Parks Capital along the way to receive some additional feedback, and we'll figure that out. But I think the large thing is I think we know, at least from a committee standpoint, that there is interest, at least, into amending the master plan to accommodate a variety of trail types within the trail network. It's just a matter of how do we get to that point so that it's appropriate, because we can't do let's branch out on a hypothetical here for a second. We couldn't do 1.5 kilometers of accessible and then 2 kilometers of backcountry, and then follow that up with another section of accessible. That doesn't make sense. We need to do this appropriately so that we're accommodating that accessible portion, and then it connects appropriately with another backcountry section. So we're looking at loops and potentially some variations, or more appropriate out and back destination type trail systems. And then we're looking at maybe various trailheads throughout the Western Common. Are we doing a segment at the beginning where it's an accessible trail and that feeds into then the 2-foot wide trails? So we need to be thoughtful and appropriate when we're doing this. And that's where we're really going to need this committee to chime in as the folks that are familiar with it and familiar with the local area and understanding of all of the needs of Western Common.
Gareth, as you're talking, I just have an idea, I guess, or a thought. I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense or be helpful to focus your initial work on just one phase of the trail, because it's such a big area. It's such a huge report, and there is such a network of trails. I wonder if it wouldn't be a helpful exercise to focus this initial step on one section of the trail and say, this is what the change would look like for this phase. You know, but we've already started and invested in a part of, you know, the initial phase of it. So if you expanded that a little bit, just to give people an idea that this is what it would look like if we took this section of the Wilderness Common area and did it, as opposed to trying to take on the whole thing. I don't know if that would make any sense or be helpful, but just a thought.
Actually, that makes an enormous amount of sense, and I think that we need to be looking at it phase by phase. You're right there, Jane.
Yeah.
That's
otherwise, and we would just get lost in the weeds. I think you could get lost in the weeds, right? If you try to tackle this type of an issue with the whole Wilderness Commons area. I mean, I know there's connectivity and everything that will have its own unique decisions to be made, but I guess phasing out this part of looking at it even might be a way to
and just
more quickly.
I mean, even if we're looking at phases 1 and 2, for instance, where they start to connect with one another. But when you start thinking about phase 4 and even phase 5 is 60 years out from right now.
So for us to spend a lot of time on that right now.
Yeah, but you're right. There's the so it's a real combination of the overarching narrative of combined trail types, but then also more of the honed in detailed look at certain segments of it. So if we look, if I just use the example of the waterfall trail section right now that goes to the east of Nichols Lake. An example there that we could do for really fostering an accessible type of trail would be the opportunity for potentially creating a new trail loop. So rather than having it as an out and back, we could do it as a loop trail and go a little bit more towards the main road there. I guess it's at 333 and looping back around rather than it just being an out and back, or do we do something different towards Nichols Run? There's different opportunities. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
So doing it in phases, have we defined, which one would be phase 1 and 2 and 3? Like, because we wouldn't know which one is phase 1 now.
Yep. To answer that, if you're looking at the actual the Western Common Plan, we're in phase 1 right now, which is effectively all around Nichols Lake. And then up into phase 2 and then phase 3, it just continues on northeast around Little Indian and then Big Indian Lake. And then phase 4 is the Ragged Lake area overall, the 5th phase being up around 4th and 5th phase being up around Otter Lake, and then what will eventually be the former solid waste management facility. But these are a ways off. So we have as I said, the overarching philosophy of combined trail type, so that it doesn't say if this plan is read 30 years from now, somebody can say, oh, we're looking at a combined trail type of 2 foot wide and 6 foot wide. Some sections in that 2 foot wide would be over 5% grade. Sections of the 6 foot trail will all be attempt to be sub 5% grade, but looking for the best opportunity to make that make sense ultimately, because we wouldn't want to plop down an accessible trail in the middle of this when it's not accessible from a trailhead. It needs to be at the start where it makes sense and you can park a vehicle. Anybody that is there, whether they're using some sort of mobility device, it's parents with strollers, it's folks that might have visual impairments, any number of restrictions that limit mobility. We want to be able to get folks there in the first place. So lots of fun stuff to look at for sure.
The trail that we've already started on from beyond the PRCC to the falls, it's not open yet, as we all know, unfortunately. It's been walked by many, including my wife and I a little while ago. It's actually getting a little bit of rough shape now, unfortunately. A few trees have fallen down around it. But it's a nice accessible trail, you know, when it's leveled up and cleaned up a little bit as a destination out and back. And then there's a loop off around Nichols Lake that was going to be accessible, that is really what brought on this discussion about possibly having a backcountry 2 foot trail. So we can sort of do an accessible out and back, and after the Y have a backcountry trail. So we sort of can have a little piece of both all in this phase one if we time it right, I think, or if we can get it right. I'd love to see this sort of officially open as opposed to having it not open. Even, you know, we put up a barrier and say, don't pass this. Well, people are going to possibly pass it regardless, but it'd be nice to have something here that people can use. And hopefully that, without having finished it, it'd be nice to have this out to the trail, out to the falls and back, at least have this open. And hopefully that can be part of this next little update as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I too worry about the timing of all of this and the fact that we have this half-finished trail, and you know, how long is it going to take us to get to the point where we can finish something? Like, what does that look like?
I'd have to speak with colleagues over in Parks Capital specifically about what it would take right now. I know from a high level, there's some issues around parking at the rear of the Prospect Road Community Center. We do have funds in place for developing a parking area for that trailhead for the Nichols Lake Trail. But then there's also some SEPTED concerns related to the facility, and maybe some additional lighting that would need to go in there, potentially from some security cameras that would need to go in there, just to ensure that it's a safe working environment for folks at the Prospect Road Community Center. It's been addressed, and it's something we would work on with them. So it's I couldn't speak to timeline, but we could get back to you on that. Because there was an option which was discussed at one point about developing a trail, at least a construction access off of McDonald Lake subdivision.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it'd be great as part of the next update if there was some kind of document that could just kind of lay out, you know, what the phases are, what our implementation time, ideally, like, you know, what our implementation timelines could be, like where our focus is going to be on, you know, for the next year or two, and hopefully getting something open. I don't know if that's possible, but just even some kind of work plan for moving this all forward in a way that we can be a bit strategic with our time, strategic with implementation, and start moving things forward around budgeting. and parks planning to make things happen, because it does feel kind of stuck and stalled right now. So, and I think all of us, particularly given that we have some new committee members, I'm a new committee member, we're kind of revamping this whole thing. If we had, some kind of, say roadmap, trail map for the project of what we might be able to expect in the next year or two in terms of work. And I particularly around the idea of that we're not going to do the entire master plan over, we're going to phase it up and we can start implementation. Like, how might that look on a work plan? I was a big fan of Gantt charts at one point in my life. My other question is that there's a couple of other things that play right now around the Western Commons. We have the new organic waste facility that is going in. And also there's Parks and Real Estate are also looking at some other land development around Mills Drive. And I'm wondering if in the report how we might be able to get an update on where those things are at and consider them in the master plan, in our master plan. I feel like it would, maybe it shouldn't be a master plan now, it should be like a phased plan. But I don't know if you're aware of those things, Gareth.
The organic sorting facility, I was aware of the expansion just because we were consulted in this, at least at a staff level, and this advisory committee was consulted at the time of their expansion, and planning and development was involved at that point. Anything related to anything else, I'm not aware of anything, at least on my level. Neither of those would necessarily be, they would be out of scope of this specific report that we'd be coming back with, because we'd be focusing solely on trail type and how that impacts the master plan, though. Anything else as far as updates, as far as what is planning development doing in partnership with Parks and Rec? Did you say Mills Drive?
Yeah.
Or anything related to waste management? I'm sure that there could be requests from this committee to get the appropriate staff to provide an update. But it's not anything that would be within my purview at this point.
Yeah, I believe, I understood at one point in time that the expansion of the solid waste managed sorting, not solid waste, composting facility, there's funds coming towards Western Common from that agreement. So it'd be nice to have a handle on how that might be able to help us with our immediate challenges here.
Yeah, so there was what's known as a community integration fund, which was developed as a result of that expansion. That was, I can't remember the exact breakdown, but it was divided between the Prospect Road Community Center, development of the Western Common, and then I believe the local recreation association was allocated some funding. Anything related to the Western Common, that budget would be overseen by Parks Capital, but that wouldn't even go into the Wilderness Parks Fund. That would be specific. Those funds would need to be specifically spent within the Western Common, but that would be everything from trail development to whatever needs to happen.
Right.
Yeah. And there's also the expansion of Ragged Lake. I don't know if that has any impact either. But Gareth, it might be worth. I don't know if we can connect offline, but just even around the trailheads, like if given that there's kind of these other things in play in the background, if it might impact where trailheads potentially could go, you probably should be aware of those discussions at least, so you have them in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We can always have discussions offline, and then we have some rough ideas of where our trailheads are going to be from at least a regional perspective, community and neighborhood perspective. Those have been identified within the master plan, but obviously things do change over time. I know that there's a study occurring within corporate real estate regarding Ragged Lake, and we're anticipating an update at least from real estate, or at least through one of my colleagues that's working with corporate real estate on that, to provide an update to this committee with the findings of that study. So.
Okay, I'm going to do something a little different here, I think. What I'd like to do is suspend our discussion of this for a second, because I have a feeling that if we get Krista to give her report now, this will bring another loop into our discussion about trailheads and how to configure such. So could you go ahead with 811, my dear?
Absolutely. And I do apologize. The second I sent you live, it was like my computer just froze. So we're back at her now. So
I understand those gremlins.
Yeah. So I did have Haruka though, as I indicated earlier. So I just wanted to let the committee know just an update around your composition. I think there was some questions around that. So Halifax Regional Council had passed a motion on April the 20th, requesting a staff report on amending Administrative Order 2016-001 Gov. It's respecting the advisory committee on the Western Common. This report was to also include a representative from the Resource Opportunity Center located on the Prospect Road Community Center. And the report is actually targeting to come back to council in fall of 2021. So I don't have too much to share from there, other than when the report does go to regional council, we can make sure that the committee has access to it when it becomes available online.
Okay, so it's not been approved yet, but it's in the works.
It's in the works, absolutely.
And so we might have that by our next meeting?
Fingers crossed. I don't want to make any promises, because if something happens at council and there's holdups or anything from there, but your next meeting's in November, so I'm optimistically hopeful. But I will make sure that the committee gets a copy of the report by email when it is available online, if that's prior to your next meeting. You don't have to wait that long.
I was hoping you're going to tell me we could have somebody and we could get their input for the next meeting, and that might help us with our trailhead discussion at the PRCC. But
yeah, we may need to look, once approved, there may be a few steps of reaching out to that individual, getting them, onto the committee, that sort of thing. But those are steps we can take once we know, how council proceeds with the item.
okay. Thank you, Krista. Okay, so that's 811 update complete. Any questions for Krista on that? All right, back to 8.1.2. We haven't quite finished that one. Is there anything else that you wish to add, Gareth, or any other questions on that? I think we talked about quite a bit there. I don't know if we can move any farther forward on that one at the moment.
No, I've got, to be entirely frank with you folks, you gave me everything that I could possibly need. I've got lots of notes here from this discussion, even which are valuable. I think, like I said, we're in the phases right now of scoping out what this work looks like. Even these contributions allow for us to scope out what this report is going to look like in more detail. I think there's going to be some discussions at a committee level, and then even also pulling on some expertise within the group, and knowledge of the trails and the historic pathway that exists through the Western Common is going to be valuable when it comes to developing this report and developing a strategy for how this looks like. I mean, it is, in some ways, there are major implications with what we're potentially changing here. But I think that the changes which we'd ultimately be suggesting are always going to be mindful of the natural setting. That's where we want to place the emphasis on the trail type. So rather than prioritizing a sub 5% grade and a perfectly cleared pathway, we need to be respectful of what this parkland is intended to be, which is wilderness, and how to get as many folks out to wilderness as possible, and enjoying it peacefully and respectfully. So thank you, folks.
I guess just one more question, Gareth, around the, I guess the Prospect Community Center and the need for lighting and parking, and are all those requirements for HRM trails? I guess I'm thinking this is a wilderness trail, yet we're kind of not being held up, but we have a bit of a roadblock, I guess, if you could put it that way, in terms of needing this upfront thing to access. When I think of going to a lot of other trails where you park on a gravel road and there isn't any lighting because most people are hiking in the daylight hours and you're accessing the trail. But maybe I'm missing something. Am I on that?
What you're missing, Jane, is the fact that the access to the trail is behind the PRCC building. And they have a storage shed back there, and they actually have a gate across that to stop access back there. So their concern is if the general public is walking back there, that they're losing a level of their security without having some lighting to protect them legally, and maybe some cameras to make sure that they're covered if there's any break-ins or anything.
Okay, so it's really less about the trail and more about the connection between the trail and the community center. Okay, I guess I hadn't gotten that.
That's why I was hoping when I jumped back to Krista there with the updating our committee and including somebody from PRCC, I was hoping we might have somebody sooner than later that might be able to be a little more specific about their concerns.
Yeah, I can add on to that exactly what Mike just said. We have a pretty lengthy list, which came from the Resource Opportunity Center through our groups and community partnership that oversee the relationship between the municipality and any of our facilities which are leased to a community entity for recreational purposes. And it just basically it's a lengthy list which needs to be addressed so that they can be integrated appropriately. But you're right, we wouldn't be doing this specifically for the wilderness park. It's to satisfy the safety of the facility and the security there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I'll call an end to discussion of 812 and let Gareth take a deep breath, grab a sip of water, and launch into 813, which is family-friendly hikes in HRM.
Thanks again.
The 50 best.
Yeah. So this, I just thought this was an interesting thing, and it's something good for folks to know on the advisory committee. I got a call, it was an email through Councillor Cuddle. Thank you, Councillor. Somebody was interested in they're writing a guidebook specifically about some family-friendly trail systems that exist within the municipality, and identified Nichols Lake, and had some questions, and I explained to them where we're at in this process and a bit of the hurdle we're at. And though they aren't necessarily able to include it because they're aiming for getting this book on shelves by 2022, and it's not technically an open trail at this point. I did discuss the opportunity of just overall mentioning the Western Common as a up and coming place which will be family friendly and accessible for a variety of folks into the future. The great thing is that while having this conversation that I quite frankly thought was going to be somebody that's just writing an interesting guidebook, I met somebody that has a lot of expertise in trails, and I think is going to be a resource definitely for us as a staff level, and if there's any opportunities to include them in as a guest for this committee, I think that there's value in bringing them in. So I just thought it was an exciting update and a good conversation, because the word is out that this is a great place to get out and enjoy the natural environment and get out for a good bit of recreation.
Well, certainly people are more involved in wanting to do recreation more after the last 18 months than they ever did before, which is good, but it's unfortunate we had to go there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I mean, it's good for park systems, that's for sure. It's demonstrated a real need for them from a variety of angles.
Right. Any questions there for Gareth?
No, but I think we can say who it is, can't we, Gareth?
I'm
I'm not
curious.
sure, actually. Can I share who it is?
Yeah,
Krista?
I will.
Sure, go for it.
It's is it Michael Hines?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
There's
he's written.
one of his
He's
books on my shelf right back here.
right. I mean, he's written so many trail books. When I got that email from him, I reminded him that we had worked together back in the
Right on my
90s.
shelf there.
Yeah, there
So-
we go.
There, Ambler's Guide to 25 City and Country Trails for HRM, and this was written in, let me see here, 2000. There you go.
There you go.
That's awesome that he's doing that. He's a great guy.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I could mention people by name, so.
Yeah, well, I think he's great, and he reached out to us, and he's,
Yeah.
he's a notable trail guide writer. So I think if we can find a way to make him a resource, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's contributed a lot, even across the country in wilderness areas and even active transportation and parkland and in an urban context as well. So I think it's always nice to meet folks that take this on as a passion and turn it into a part of their day-to-day from a professional side of things. So it was a great conversation. So
Wonderful.
Good. Excellent. That's good news. And let's go straight on to 8.1.4. Grave sites. Well, I didn't expect to see that coming.
This was another one that I was unexpected. I thought it would be interesting enough to have a conversation about writing a guidebook and including any of the work that I'm doing. And the next concern was related to grave sites. So I had a constituent that has some family members that I believe it was their great grandparents that were buried kind of not far from the organic sorting facility, I think, in Goodwood there. So they had a concern, and it was actually related to the 1999 plan that EDM did. And it was more to the boundary lines of the common that they thought were trail lines. So I assured the individual from a variety of reasons that A, we don't have trails running through what seems to be their grave site, but even if we did have trails and came across that during construction, we would very respectfully veer around those sorts of sections and leave people resting there. Again, it's nice to know that folks are involved and engaged on this project. As Councillor Cuddle alluded to, sometimes it feels like this is a bit of a holding pattern on this project, much to the chagrin of all of us. But more and more eyes and more awareness that this is one day going to be a fantastic, robust park is a good thing. And we'll make sure that if we do come across anything for any sort of archaeological sensitivity through the construction of the trail, that we would address that as appropriately and efficiently as possible, just because that's our responsibility as a municipality and just general civility. Hi, Councillor.
Good, Councillor.
So do we know where the graves are? Have we
Approximately. I haven't been out, to be honest. I intended to get the exact coordinates and go have a look, make sure that it didn't go anywhere according to our plan, but it was through conversations and showing a few different maps based on the actual figure 23 is the one that I've been using. When I was speaking with the constituent, their concerns were no longer there. It's like, oh, that's the pink trail, and I said, yes, the pink pathway is what we're really looking at as a concept. And he's like, oh, that's nowhere near it. So when I get some more time on my hands, or when I have free time during the weekend, I might just head out and see what I can find to make sure that it really isn't anywhere.
Did this person? Sorry, I was going to say, does this person actually know where they are? Can they show somebody?
Yeah, they have the actual coordinates, but I believe, at least through my conversations with them, that they're more towards the main road of 333. than actually deeper into the Western Common. Because if ultimately there's quite a large buffer between the main road and where the trail system would be running, at least up towards Ragged Lake from Nichols and Big Indian Lake.
It still would be good to have a couple of pictures and some eyes on for sure.
Yeah, and we know that. I mean, there's a lot within. I don't think that this is the last time that we're going to hear about grave sites or any unusual things within the Western Common. Nothing surprises me. It's a big swath of land that people have been using for many, many years, well before the municipality had any sort of responsibility there. So,
Gareth, is it the responsibility of our committee to make sure that that question gets documented and addressed to the satisfaction of those people?
No,
Isn't?
that would be
Okay.
that would be at a staff level. That question came through, I believe, might have been through the clerk's office. I'm not sure. I'd have to look back through my emails. It was a week or two ago. So,
Okay.
And I would also suggest that guy, Wayne Rogers, his family gravesite, that is, he's also a wealth of knowledge about the Western Common.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does anyone know him? I mean, I only have text exchanges with him most of the time, but Wayne Rogers?
Yeah, he was, I believe, part of the original advisory group.
Yeah.
For the putting together the master plan.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that have just vast amounts of knowledge, well beyond anything that I could ever wrap my head around at this point. I think I'll spend the rest of my career trying to get to a lot of folks' level as far as their involvement with the Western Common. So.
Great.
All right. Any more on this one?
No, nothing at this point.
I think we've reached the end of my our agenda here, folks. Our next meeting is for November 24th. And if there's nothing else, maybe we can adjourn. But before that, thank you for being there and creating a quorum, folks. I was gotta say a little worried there. Thank you for calling, Krista, and thank you, Hama, for being there. Anyway, so shall we be adjourned and we'll speak face to face, hopefully, in November.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike, for chairing and being here to chair this committee. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We can certainly do that. Would somebody like to give a motion?
I will.
I will second.
All right. Councillor Cuddle and Hamad, first and second. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Enjoy your weekend.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Jared. Oh, well, that went well. Thank you for the, Krista, you still there?
Yes, I'm just ending the
Yeah.
stream now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you for